Welcome to the Murder in 20 podcast, where I, Bobby Stevens, am your host with a new episode every Wednesday. If you're a serious fan of true crime and love listening to podcasts, but don't want all that small talk, you've come to the right place. We get right to the facts. Murder in 20 episodes are concise and complete in 20 minutes. Less talk and more true crime. Every episode is free on our website at murderin20.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Also learn about upcoming episodes on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. To support Murder in 20, feel free to leave a 5-star review on any one of them, or all of them. We're not shy. And we couldn't do this podcast without all our sources, which we acknowledge throughout the podcast and are listed on our website. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's get to this week's episode. Bruce Adams and Brian Orr were good friends growing up and lived just down the road from each other in Sullivan, Indiana. Then Bruce met Christina. They got married and had a baby girl named Tiffanie in 1994. But their marriage wasn't meant to last, and they divorced in 2003. Then Brian began dating Christina, and they lived together just down the block from Bruce. The love triangle drove a wedge between the two friends, and it didn't help that Bruce could see his ex-wife living with his ex-friend a stone's throw from his house. Over the years, the family's feuding resulted in many calls to the police. At first, Tiffanie was happy to have an extended family. She now had a stepbrother, Jonhnus. But things turned ugly in 2013. When Tiffanie accused Jonhnus of rape, she reported it to the police, but when she went to the hospital to have a rape test, she changed her mind. She was worried what it would do to the family. Their family was complicated. Tiffanie had an addiction to prescription pills, and Jonhnus helped her feed that addiction. Their relationship became toxic, and in the summer of 2013, those around them heard Jonhnus threaten to kill Tiffanie and her dad Bruce several times. In the spring of 2014, Tiffanie was dating Artem McHenry when she became pregnant. Tiffanie and Artem struggled with their relationship. Artem had been adopted as a young child and was looking forward to having a son. They'd already picked out a name, Brynsten Edward. Wabash Valley News reported that Artem wanted Tiffanie to give up her addiction to prescription pills while she was pregnant. Although it appears the young couple loved each other, they hadn't figured out how to make it work and took a break. During that time, Artem was seeking a better job to provide a better life for their son. Meanwhile, Tiffanie didn't like how Brian was treating her mom. Her Aunt Donna K. Adams told Investigation Discovery, in an episode of Grave Mysteries called Fatal Family Secrets, that Tiffanie felt Brian was vindictive, manipulative, and controlling over her mother. In September 2014, Christina left Brian and got an order of protection. Then not long after, Christina had a change of heart and withdrew the order and went back to Brian. Tiffanie was not happy with her decision and took to Facebook to vent her frustrations, posting negative comments about Brian. On September 8th, Jonhnus sought a protective order from the police. He claimed he was being harassed by Tiffanie and that she'd falsely accused him of rape, which he steadfastly denied. Tiffanie then began dating Donnie Barron, and they moved to the nearby town of Vincent's for Donnie's job. Court records indicate that on Wednesday, November 5th, Tiffanie wanted to pick up some baby clothes from people who lived in Sullivan. She and Donnie didn't drive or have a vehicle, so her dad Bruce picked the couple up at 9 a.m. After arriving in his home with Donnie and Tiffanie, Bruce ran an errand. Around 11 a.m., Tiffanie called her mom, then decided to walk over to her house just a few houses away to see if she could score some pain pills. Tiffanie never stayed more than a few minutes at her mother's, so Donnie thought she'd be back within 30 minutes. But when she didn't return by then, he called Tiffany's cell, but got no answer. Then when Bruce returned from the store and Tiffanie still wasn't back, Donnie was getting more concerned. Investigation Discovery describes Donnie's text to Tiffanie, and I quote, "How long are you staying at your mom's?" He doesn't receive a reply. So then he asks, "Where are you?" Again, no reply. So he texts her, "Hello, text me back, please." And still no reply from Tiffanie. Tiffany's dad tried calling her several times too. No response. Meanwhile, Tiffanie had walked over to her mom's house, but she wasn't home, and she turned to leave the front doorstep. She spotted Jonhnus. He was driving a green Chevy Blazer. Now, Jonhnus didn't own a vehicle, but his friend Jim Fish had asked him for a favor a day earlier. Jim was working, but his wife Katrina needed a ride to her job in nearby Linton at 7:30 a.m. So Jonhnus dropped off Jim at the sawmill where he worked, then dropped off Katrina. He then had a few hours to kill, so he went home and spent time with his wife Amber. At 11:15, he left to go pick up Jim on his lunch break so he could drop Jonhnus back off at his house. Amber was expecting Jonhnus back home around 11:40 a.m. But Jonhnus didn't arrive at the sawmill, and at 11:50 a.m., Jim texted Amber. She said Jonhnus wasn't home. Tiffanie hopped into the truck with Jonhnus. She was 8 months pregnant. No one knows what Jonhnus said to convince her to hop in, but he was her stepbrother and also her drug supplier. Court records show that Jonhnus used Tiffanie's cell phone to text his wife Amber. Jonhnus and Amber shared a cell phone, and that day it was with Amber. At 11:56 a.m., she received a text that the blazer had broken down. Amber didn't recognize the number, so she texted back, "Who is this?" At 12:01, she received a reply, "Jonhnus, duh. The blazer broke down." At 12:03, he texted, "Headed to Jim's work." At 12:06, Amber texted that she was using a golf cart to go look for him. Jonhnus texted her back to head back home. He was on the back road to the lake, the way I always take. At 12:10, Amber asked whose phone Jonhnus is using, and he replied, "Don't know them. Man and woman. Let me text you. Gotta get back now, so can leave." Now, something must have gone horribly wrong after those text messages. Just before 1 p.m., Bruce received 3 phone calls from Tiffanie's cell. On the first call, he could hear a man's voice in the background. Then the call was cut off. The second call, he heard nothing. Then on the third call, at 12:59 p.m., he could hear a man's voice yelling in the background again, and sensed her phone had been snatched out of her hand. On one of the calls, he heard Tiffanie's voice saying, "Dad, Dad." Bruce thought he recognized the male voice. It sounded like Brian. Bruce immediately tried calling Tiffanie back. He tried 10 times, but only got her voicemail. The blazer stopped near County Road 325 East, and Jonhnus and Tiffanie exited the truck. Tiffanie must have ran, but being 8 months pregnant and with the wet ground, it was difficult. Jonhnus was able to overtake her. In a burst of rage, he used her red hoodie as a noose and tied it around her neck. Tiffanie died in a cornfield. Jonhnus didn't call 911. If he had, her son Brynsten may have lived, but Jonhnus didn't give him that chance. Jonhnus grabbed Tiffanie's phone and drove across the causeway crossing at Sullivan Lake. At 1:26 p.m., the last call from Tiffanie's cell phone was to her mother's phone number, but she didn't answer. Jonhnus deleted his text messages on Tiffanie's phone and threw it into the lake. At 1:30 p.m., he finally showed up at Jim's work. That afternoon, Jonhnus and Amber went to Brian and Christina's home. They had an action-mounted camera on their front porch. Bruce happened to look out and saw them arrive, then saw Jonhnus reach up and tinker with something on the front porch. Bruce was frantic about finding Tiffanie, and when Brian and Christina finally returned home in the afternoon, he went over and confronted them, but they claimed they hadn't seen Tiffanie. The next day, on November 6th, Brian contacted Jonhnus and told him the SD card was missing from his front porch camera. Jonhnus and Amber went over and replaced the SD card. It had been 2 days since Tiffanie's frantic phone calls, and Bruce finally reported her missing to authorities. He thought because she was an adult, he had to wait 48 hours, but that's not always the case. Law enforcement began investigating. Tiffanie was last seen wearing a pink shirt, red hoodie, shorts, and brown boots. Donnie had mysteriously left town and gone back to work. Police tracked him down and questioned him. Then they tracked down Artem, who had a solid alibi, and both were ruled out as suspects. The sheriff's office subpoenaed Tiffanie's cell phone records, and also the records for the cell phone Jonhnus and Amber shared. In the meantime, friends and family conducted search parties, community events, vigils, and hung out posters. But Jonhnus and Amber never attended. Neither did Brian and Christina. Tiffany's family were hoping that if she decided to go away and take some time for herself, that she'd return soon. It was nearing her baby's due date. As reported in the Tribune-Star, on Tuesday, December 30th, farmer Sean Drake decided it was finally time to harvest his cornfields. It was later than usual. This season the ground had been really wet, so he waited for the soil to freeze up so the columbine wouldn't sink in the mud. On his cornfield he spotted a bright pink shirt and a brown pair of boots. He realized he was looking at the body of a woman, a decomposed body. Authorities arrived and noticed a red jacket was knotted around the body, a leaf entwined within the knots. The corn stalks around the body appeared to be knocked down. There was no wallet, no cell phone. An autopsy was conducted the next day. The weather and animals had ravaged the body. Tiffanie was identified by dental records. She had been missing for 55 days. A forensic pathologist determined a cause of death was strangulation. She also had one broken rib on her left side. It was also determined that she had likely died the day she went missing and had been lying dead and alone in that cornfield since then. Sadly, her baby died of suffocation caused by her mother's death. It was a double homicide. Tiffanie was only 20 years old. A forensic biologist tested the red jacket for DNA, but could not find enough to establish a DNA profile, and the leaf that had been entwined in the jacket matched the type of leaves found in the area around the cornfield. Police were suspicious of Jonhnus and interviewed him the day after Tiffany's body was found. He and Amber claimed they hadn't seen Tiffany since September, and that they didn't own a vehicle and had been together all day and watched a rented video on the day Tiffany disappeared. But police knew this to be a lie. Cell phone records showed 14 texts between Tiffany's phone and Amber and Jonhnus's phone that day. But phone records don't show what was texted, only the phone numbers that sent and received texts. So police started interviewing people whose numbers appeared on those cell phone records, and they discovered Jim Fish, who told them Jonhnus had borrowed his blazer the day Tiffany disappeared. On January 20th, 2015, police visited Jonhnus and Amber again. When they asked to see their cell phone, they claimed they didn't have it. They'd bought a new one. When confronted with Jim's story, Jonhnus admitted that he'd borrowed the blazer. Police then checked on their alibi renting a video and discovered that hadn't happened until 5 p.m. A search warrant was issued for the blazer, and a forensic scientist from the Indiana State Police Laboratory examined it. In it, they found red fibers that were consistent with the jacket found around Tiffany's neck. The fibers were sent for testing. On January 21st, Jonhnus was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder, one for Tiffany and one for her unborn son. The FBI examined the digital trail from Tiffany's phone. They determined that her phone had made it to her mother's house. It then pinged off multiple towers, showing she traveled 5 miles. It was moving too fast for walking. She must have been in a vehicle. Her phone moved from west to east to where her body had been found. The last cell phone ping came from an area 100 feet away from the Lake Sullivan Causeway. Law enforcement at this point only had circumstantial evidence against Jonhnus. He denied being involved with Tiffany's disappearance, but they believe he'd picked her up in the blazer at her mother's and drove her to her murder site. But they needed proof, so they decided to find a needle in a haystack, or in this case, a cell phone thrown into the lake. On August 25th, Indiana State Police divers entered the water in Sullivan Lake. After an extensive search, and against all odds, on the second day of their search, they found Tiffany's cell phone. It was sent to the Indiana State Police Lab in Indianapolis to be examined. They were able to recover 2 photos, and although text messages had been deleted on the day Tiffany and her son died, they were able to recover them, every single word. Court records revealed that while Jonhnus was held in jail between August 2015 to February 2016, fellow inmate John Klein told authorities about a time he and Jonhnus were watching TV. It was a cold case murder investigation, and John commented to Jonhnus, and I quote, He found it hard to believe that someone could avoid talking about a crime like that for so long. And Jonhnus replied, "You'd be amazed at what you can live with when you have to." On another occasion, Jonhnus indicated that he didn't feel sorry about what he did to Tiffanie, but he did feel bad about the baby. Donnie also testified at the trial that Tiffanie would have gotten into the blazer with Jonhnus because of her pill addiction, and that she'd take care of that addiction before anything else. Amber testified that Jonhnus was always cheating on her, and when he went missing for a few hours on November 5th, she thought he was cheating again. She'd also told police during questioning that on the day Jonhnus had no marks on his body, no signs of a struggle, and that if you're getting choked, you fight back. Now the interesting thing is, at the time Amber said that, police had never revealed publicly that Tiffanie had been strangled. She also testified that she'd previously said if she thought Jonhnus had killed Tiffanie, she would divorce him. In November, 11 months after Tiffany's body was found, Amber filed for divorce. Jonhnus maintained his innocence, but his defense was weak. He had a criminal history going back to when he was a juvenile and 12 convictions as an adult, mostly for battery against law enforcement and women, proof that he couldn't control his anger. Prosecutors brought up the protective order Jonhnus had filed against Tiffanie, thus providing a motive. They pointed out Jonhnus had the use of a vehicle at the time she disappeared, and his route took him right by Tiffany's mother's home, and he knew about the security camera at his father's house. The trial lasted 5 days, and on July 1st, all the circumstantial evidence together provided the jury with enough evidence to find Jonhnus guilty of 2 counts of murder. In sentencing him on July 29th, the judge said, "Leaving Tiffanie and her unborn child to die in a field, their bodies subjected to the effects of nature and the animals, showed particular callousness." He sentenced Jonhnus to 120 years, 60 years for each murder. Jonhnus was 34 years old. Jonhnus has never admitted to killing Tiffanie and her son and appealed his sentence. In February 2018, the Indiana Court of Appeals upheld his conviction. He is incarcerated at the Indiana Department of Corrections. His projected release date is 2102, when Jonhnus would be 119 years old. In 2015, Tiffany's older brother Tiffanie Adams wrote a tribute song to her called Rest Easy. Listening to it on SoundCloud, Anthony's lyrics to his little sister are beautiful and haunting. Fly over the ocean like a bird in the sky. Break free from those chains that once were so tight. You'll rest easier tonight. Thanks for listening to the Murder in 20 podcast with less talk and more true crime. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday for the episode of serial arsonist John Orr. As the evil flames danced he hid in their shadows, thousands of acres burned in California, and hundreds of homes were reduced to charred rubble. A single fingerprint would lead to a firefighter with a dark secret of destruction and murder. We'd like to acknowledge Purple Planet for use of their music and our many editorial sources who are listed on our website. If you're dying to hear more, past episodes of Murder in 20 are available for free at murderin20.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And every week we announce upcoming episodes on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Until then, stay safe, sleep with the lights on, and don't play with strangers.